Michael Realbuto. Have you ever felt what it's like to have your trust broken? It hurts. It makes us swear we'll never put that much trust into someone ever again. But we do. Our trust is broken again. We say, okay, I'm never opening myself back up to someone ever again. But we do. Why? Don't we yearn to be comforted? Don't we yearn for happiness? Mostly, though, we long for satisfying human relationships. I believe in trust because it's trust that will shape our future. According to opinion polls, only 1/3 of Americans say most people can be trusted these days. Half felt that way in 1972. After only 40 years, a record high of 2/3 of Americans say you can't be too careful in dealing with people. It's obvious that we are heading in the wrong direction as a country, but I do believe it can be resurrected. There are 3 values I want to break down when it comes to solving this issue: accountability, authenticity, and patience. As individuals, it's essential that we adopt these values today in order to shape a more trusting society tomorrow. So accountability, that's in here. It's mental. Resolving trust issues is not about getting someone else to be trustworthy. It's about you trusting yourself. It's like that New Year's Day diet you meant to start, that workout you meant to get to the other day, or that homework that you put off until tomorrow morning. The reality is, if you tell yourself you're going to do something and then you don't do it, you're not being accountable with yourself, and therefore you're not being trustworthy with yourself. We've all heard the story of the boy who cried wolf. Imagine telling your little brother or daughter that you're going to play with her and then not doing it. Eventually, the child will learn that you're not trustworthy. The same applies with your inner child. If you tell yourself, your inner child, that you're going to take care of yourself in some way, and then you don't do it, your inner child learns that there's no loving inner adult to trust. And since so many of us project onto others our own inner issues, it's likely that if we're not trustworthy with ourselves, we'll project untrustworthiness onto others. So if you promise yourself you'll start that diet, or go to the gym, or get your homework done by tonight, then do it. Hold yourself accountable. It sounds so simple, yet so many of us don't do it. Hurdling this mental roadblock would go such a long way when it comes to trusting others, because at the end of the day, how are you supposed to expect others to count on you when you have a hard time holding your own self accountable? Developing this strong mentality will help us be able to place full trust in ourselves, but how do we portray this trust that we feel with ourselves to others? How do we get others to trust us in this dishonest society that we live in? Authenticity. It comes from here. We have to show people our whole heart, our whole self, in order to portray true trustworthiness. This idea is actually deeply rooted in me. Growing up, I struggled being my whole self, as I'm sure a lot of you did. In high school, I forced my way into this friend group made up of your stereotypical jocks. These were the group of kids that weren't very accepting. They'd walk through the halls like they owned the school, not afraid of making hurtful jokes to those who they felt were beneath them. I remember focusing every day on not falling beneath them, so I mirrored them. When they laughed, I laughed. When they talked about someone behind their back, I did the same. I was scared of being this slice but different from them, so I wore a mask. Closed up, watching cautiously, managing this tight, top-down control. There was a valve in my throat. I knew what I felt deep inside, but I rarely expressed it. From the outside, this looked like a lack of trust in other people, and while this was part of it, I mainly didn't trust myself. I didn't trust that the true me was good enough or likable enough. I was so worried about fitting in that I forgot who I really was. There used to be a time when I considered myself kind, accepting, someone who people could always rely on. And what I didn't realize until later was that I still possessed these qualities. They were simply buried. But I took a long, hard look at myself in the mirror, and I thought, are these things I'm trying to hide about myself really so bad or so weak? And the answer is no. So I learned to stop wearing a mask and come back to my true self. And it was only then where I was able to take chances, make mistakes, lighten up, and learn from them. And believe me, I'm still learning. When you decide to trust your whole self, you will find so much that's right inside. So much knowing of what's true and what matters, so much life and heart, so many strengths. And most importantly, you give others a reason to trust you. According to Success Magazine, the #1 trait of trustworthy people is authenticity. People simply want to be around others who are real. When you show your own individually beautiful authenticity to this world, you will become more trustworthy to those around you, making it easier for you to reciprocate this trust. It's a known fact by psychological scientists around the world that humans are naturally inclined to trust others, but don't always. They found that the hormone oxytocin is released in our body to reduce stress when we interact with others. When it comes to trust, the oxytocin response is graded. The more trustworthy someone appears to be, the more oxytocin our brain produces and the more motivated we are to interact with them. This means that the more authentic and therefore trustworthy we become, the more people want to talk to us, the more relationships that we'll build. And now it's easy to say that when we start interacting more as a community and building these interpersonal relationships, that trust will just naturally occur, but that's not always the case. The more authentic you are, yes, the more willing people are to interact with you. Science proves that. But we're missing one key variable: patience. Do we have the patience to build a foundation of trust in our relationships? In today's society, I'd argue that in general we don't. But the reason it can be so hard to place trust in others is because we live in a reality where trust can be crushed in an instant, but requires gentle care in order to be built over time. The way I see it, there are two paths we can take in most situations. One is the path of experiencing pleasure immediately, and the other is the more difficult path of delaying pleasure for a greater purpose. It's fairly evident that we're currently living in a world that values the former. The need for instant gratification in today's society is everywhere. Our cultural norms encourage us to seek band-aid solutions and temporary comforts, basically whatever it takes to ease our discomfort now. This is apparent in the prevalence of casinos, quick-fix medications, and get-rich-quick schemes. I mean, come on, we get frustrated when our computer takes more than 2 seconds for a Google search. The fact of the matter is that desiring instant gratification is a hard trap to escape. So how can we learn to be more patient? Start to practice delayed gratification in our everyday lives. Wait until you have the money to pay for a car before you buy it. Bear through that difficult job if it means it'll help boost your career in the future. The more you do it, the more it will become a part of you and the more you will become it. The more we practice delaying gratification, the better we get at developing a tolerance for waiting, the more willing we will be to endure the slow, painstaking process of building trust. It may not be the instant pleasure that we as human beings desire, but it results in such a greater and more important reward in the future. Trust matters for our future. Imagine living in a community where we can lean on each other, depend on each other, be unified. That is where our future lies. Imagine living in a world where instead of getting caught in this constant cycle of broken trust, we instead are constantly showered with 3 simple words: I trust you. So please trust me when I say we're all capable of playing our part in creating this cultural shift, because I trust you. It starts in here and in here, and it continues with you.